What's going on, guys, and welcome back. So in this video I'm going to be doing a little bit of work on the daily. So the daily for me is this Avalanche. I do like the daily trucks. I just like the feel and the ride and the comfort, and this thing, I'm not the biggest fan of the looks of it, but it's decently sharp, you know, with the wheels on it and everything. But I do, however, want to make it sound really nice. I have been working on doing the exhaust over for it because I had a Manifold in it and it was super quiet. I was not a huge fan, so I decided that I would like to revamp it, and I ended up putting a Gibson on it. So it's a Gibson MWA Race, and I put it up under there, and I side dumped it here right before the tire, and it looks a little bit dumb because of the piping, but it just has to come around the frame like that, and this thing doesn't have much rocker. There's a lot of frame exposed, so it just kind of looks funny, and I'm not the best fabricator. But if you look under here, you can see the muffler, and that's about all there is to it. Nothing crazy. So I'll go ahead and give it a start here. And once it's not entirely cold, it was driven earlier today, so you know, you'll just get a basic idea. It's not a super cold start, but it's pretty warm out anyway. You should be able to get an idea. And then we're gonna do a little bit more to this thing. We're gonna install some short tube headers. So I'd like to see what kind of difference I will get just by installing short tubes, because I don't want to do the long tubes and have to worry about emissions for this thing, because I do still have to do emissions. It's only 2003, so we have that to worry about for a while, so I can't get rid of the cats, and I don't want to because it's a daily and I'd like to be good for the environment and run the stock cats. So we're going to do that, whereas the Honda is a different story. You know, that thing is only taken out a few times, so not really as concerned. But anyway, this thing, we're going to go ahead and make it a little bit louder, hopefully. So I'm going to go ahead and move the cars, shuffle the cars around. I need to back this thing in because I may have to use the welder in order to get the stock manifolds off, which I'll show you guys. We have an unfortunate scenario, but most of you guys that are doing this are going to have this exact same problem. So you better stay tuned and pay attention. So I got the truck all pulled in the garage backwards because my 220 welding outlet is right over here on the wall. So I took out the spark plug wires already. I just used a pair of pliers and this pair right here. It's like a nice hook needle nose, long one. And I smashed my elbow a few times, but other than that, not too bad because I just did plugs and wires on this thing. But if you haven't, it's probably going to be a little bit more of a pain. But just keep working at it. And avoid pulling it by the wire unless you're planning on replacing them, because when I was replacing mine, I yanked on it by the wire and it just ripped right out. So you know, keep that in mind. But I'm gonna go ahead and try to get this all torn down. You can see what I'm talking about over here. Hopefully you can see what I'm talking about right here. We have a snapped off stud. Over here you can see we have our bolts that go in, but over here we have one that is actually snapped off in the cylinder head. So we're gonna have to take it off and figure out if it's flush or if it's protruding or whatever, and I'm gonna probably try to weld a nut on it and then back it off. And that's why I need to be close to the welder here, because that's my trick that I'm gonna try to use. So we're going to try and remove all these bolts that we can off of these headers, off the stock exhaust manifold, and see how many snap. Hopefully we get them all to come out. I'm gonna see what the best way to go about this is. Alright guys, so I'm a little bit of a ways into this. I first started breaking everything loose from up top. I recommend doing this while the motor is still warm. I guess we're gonna try out, I'm gonna end up doing the other side probably tomorrow. So we're going to see how that goes with everything. But I just got the wheel liner all bent out of the way. It shouldn't be a big deal. So it'll spring right back. But yeah, so I did take the wheel off, and you can see in there we have really clear access to the manifold through here. It's like really easy to see. So yeah, you can definitely see that I did take most of them out. The front one was snapped, but the second, third, fourth one in are all out, and now I gotta get the fifth one out, which is already cracked loose, and the rear snapped off as well. And then I did get these three ones here from the Y pipe to the manifold, which is pretty difficult because they're super tight and the nuts on there are just ridiculously tight. So I tried to do a breaker bar, and that wasn't doing it. So I ended up not using a breaker bar, and I ended up instead using some heat, and I used a torch, some MAP gas like this right here. So this is MAP gas. It's a bit stronger than propane. It's really good stuff. So I ended up using this, and I heated up just the nut just to get it to expand just enough, and then I was able to put the impact gun on it and hit it with the impact gun with a 15 and just a long extension on there and get it off. That's the only way I was able to get them. I did each individual one at a time with the torch, and I was able to get all three off. And we do have new hardware, so worst case you could cut it, but I don't really want to get into that. It's nice that we can just use some heat and then zip it off. So I got that one left to do, and then I will have the old manifold off, but I do still have to do a little bit of welding. But I think I'll pick up with this project in the morning. But it does look like it will be pretty easy to get to everything down here. It's not too crazy. It seems like it's going to be nice and accessible. So I'm happy about that. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that one off, and we'll go ahead and see what it all looks like in there. And at least we have a new gasket, so should be pretty good. So guys, it's the following morning, and I am back at it. I decided that I would finish up today, so I need to bust out the welder, just because that's the way that I'm going to try to remove these broken off studs. As you can see up in here, right above my clamp, hopefully the light is good enough, but I have this broken off stud, which is broken off deeper than the actual surface of the head. So that is going to definitely be a tough one, as well as the one in the back is also broken off about that deep, if not deeper. So I have a clamp here for my welder. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the battery so we don't fry anything. And then I'm just going to go ahead and try to build this up a little bit, enough to where I can get a nut on it. And once I can get a nut on it, I can go ahead and back it out, and the heat should help me too. So we're just going to go ahead and do that, and I shouldn't be melting or damaging the head at all. I'm probably going to cover the hole here. Will be nice. I'm going to stuff this with some paper towel or something like that, and this one too, just so we don't get any slag in the engine. But we should be okay. I'm going to go ahead and try to get a few tacks on it. I might just try to clean off the surface a little bit first, just like deburr it a little bit, scratch it up so that the welder makes a nice first tack. So guys, I was able to get out the frontmost snapped off bolt. So here's how I ended up getting it out. I did attempt to weld nuts onto it. I think I tried 3 different ones, and they all kind of had the same fate. They would turn for a little while, and then they would eventually snap off, just because I didn't really get a good weld. This one was right at the beginning. I think this one broke off somewhere midway through, but each of them helped me turn it a little bit, so I did get some use out of it. There was another one somewhere too, but I did get some. Oh, here's the other one over on top of the AC compressor. Oh, now it's down there in the AC compressor. I'll have to get that later. But yeah, so basically I tried the nut method and it kind of worked, but at the same time I ended up just tacking it on there a bunch of times till I like gobbed it on. And once I was able to do that, I got some vice grips on it and I was able to spin it out. So we'll see how we do with this one back here. I still have this guy to work on right there, this nice rusty one. GoPro's kind of blocking the light. Yeah, that rusty one right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can scrape that a little bit so I can get a better weld to it, and put my clamp on the front of the block like I had before. This is where I had, I'll show you guys. Yeah, so that's where I've been putting the clamp. So I'm going to go ahead and wire brush that and maybe use a little something to get the metal cleaner so we can try to get a tack on there. We'll get a few tacks and build it out. And then after that, I guess we will proceed to attempting to weld a nut on it, and we'll see if that helps get us a little bit. Oh, we almost had it. So you can see here, this is the stock manifold. This thing is super heavy, like it's I don't even know, probably like 35 pounds or so, whereas this thing is probably closer to like 8 pounds, you know what I mean? So it's a lot nice, like as far as weight goes and flow. I think there's no way you can go wrong, even with these cheap eBay style manifolds. These are actually from Amazon. Paid $120 for these. I'll throw the link in the description, but any similar style that fits your LS motor are probably going to be about the same. It's a cheap China header. You know, the build quality is actually better than I thought it would be. The welds are decent. Certainly probably better than what I would be able to do if I had a TIG welder. So, you know, they have some level of skill there. So honestly, as long as it fits, and as long as the surfaces are true, nice and flat, then it should seal, and nobody seems to have problems with that in all the reviews that I've read. So the only things that I did read was that you really should buy the proper hardware for this thing. So I bought some Dorman new bolts, because obviously all of our bolts are snapped, and these are the nice new style, so they got a larger head on them, and they're corrosion resistant as well. So hopefully these guys don't snap. We'll probably not need to take these off anytime soon though. And I also went ahead and got new OE style gaskets. They're a multi-layer steel gasket. It's like a head gasket. They come with these stupid like rubber crush ones, and these are garbage. You shouldn't use these. I use these on my Honda when I first did the turbo build, and it blows out everywhere. You can't use it. So you got to get a OEM style gasket with the crush collars around here, and you'll see that it's uncrushed. So you got to get a new gasket, and it's good to get new donuts for the lower area too. So this is the old donut. You can see it's kind of worn out. It's already been compressed, probably taken out a couple of times already. This thing had a transmission put in it, so it definitely was out. The Y pipe was out of this thing. And this right here is a new donut, and then this is for the other side. Each side is different. I'll show you guys the other side when I get there. But yeah, so we're not going to use any of this hardware here, and we're also not. We are going to use this to bolt this, to nut and bolt this with a washer to the bottom 3-bolt flanges on here. But we are going to use the appropriate gaskets for the vehicle. So that's how I plan to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and try to slap on the passenger side, and we'll see how it looks. So what I've done here is basically make my own thread chaser. I took a bolt that fits the actual cylinder head. I was going to use one of the China bolts that this kit came with, but those bolts don't even screw into the head. They're the wrong size entirely. So that's fine. I just ended up finding this that fit, and I cut a big slot in it, and I'm using this to chase all the threads out of all these holes because I want them to torque down properly so we get this gasket to sit really good because I don't want any leaks. So I already went through the first one a couple of times, and it seems to go all the way down by hand and then thread out, which that's one of the ones that there was a snapped bolt on, so that's good to know that those threads are really clean. So I'm going to go through and do all of them, and after they're all set, then I'm going to go ahead and bolt up the manifold, and then I'll leave the donut section for last. But yeah, that's the way I'm going to do this whole thing here. So guys, I went ahead and I torqued everything down. The spec is 15 foot-pounds, which they want you to do it in 2 stages, like they said 89 inch-pounds and then 15 foot-pounds. But I just kind of went to what I felt like was tight, and I started on the center 2, and then worked on these 2, and then the outer 2, and then I did it again, and then I did it a 3rd time, just sort of getting there. And then afterwards I went over it a 4th time just to make sure, and I got little bit of torque out of every single one of them on the end. Just making sure they're that extra amount of tight. I went probably in the 15 to 20 range. Maybe a little bit over 15, but should be fine. I think they can handle it. And yeah, I went ahead and used my own hardware for this because the supplied hardware was not long enough to reach through this flange. So that's kind of a downside there because it needs to clamp that donut. So you just want to make sure that you're straight and you're square and you clamp down evenly on all 3 of these here. It's actually pretty easy to get to from up here. So I was able to crank it down really good. I used my breaker bar to tighten it down. You don't want to snap them, but you want to make sure it's nice and tight on the donut. And all these guys are cranked down tight up there. Now all I really have to do is put the dipstick back in, which I didn't mention yesterday. But the dipstick, the way I got it out was spraying WD-40 where it goes into the pan there. And then I just wiggled it around a lot and tried to spin it, and there's a 1 bolt that goes into here, 17, and I took that out, and you just kind of wiggle it back and forth, and eventually you can pry it out. Sometimes they do break right here by the manifold, and if it does snap off, you'll need to just yank it out and replace it, but that's just the way it goes. So there's a lot of things that could go wrong here, but I'll show you guys. Hopefully this gives you some advice on what to prepare for. If you see your dipstick's really rotted, then you might want to get that coming. But mine just had a little surface rust, thankfully. So I'm going to go ahead and try to sand it, shoot a little bit of paint on it before I do end up putting it back in, a little bit of high temp enamel, and maybe it'll last a little bit longer this time. But yeah, so I'm ready on this side. I'm all set. So I'm just going to do that, put the plugs back, and there's a couple other things that I wanted to do while I was over here. One of which smash this in so that I stop hitting it with my tire. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That's all I really wanted to do. And then I'll go ahead and lower this thing down on this side, jack it up on the other side, and get to work extracting the 1 stud and the other ones on that side. I think I might heat up the whole cylinder head with a torch just because I really liked the way the cylinder head was hot and it released those bolts yesterday. That was really nice. So I don't know, it sucks that I guess I could probably run it like this with one side, but I just want to start it up at the end and hear what it sounds like at the end. I prefer to do it like that. And yeah, definitely going to fire it up, make sure it doesn't have any leaks after I get both sides done. And we'll check to make sure that it's not pissing out anywhere, and as long as it isn't, it'll be good to get this thing pulled out. So guys, I'm on the other side now, and there's a lot more in your way. There are some wires. There's the whole steering shaft coming down here and the eye shaft, and I'm gonna have to take the eye shaft out because it is totally in my way here for me to remove this old manifold. I would like to try to pull this old one out from the top, and it's making it super difficult to do that, so I'm gonna have to remove the eye shaft, make sure that the steering wheel doesn't turn so we don't rip our airbag wire out on the inside or whatever. And yeah, so the front one did snap on me, so I do have 2 to do on this side as well, 1 all the way up front and 1 all the way in the back, which back one may or may not be kind of hard to get to. I'm not sure if I might try to pull off the shield, give myself a little more room, Yeah, we got to see what it's looking like once we get in there. We can tuck some of these wires up and out of our way. But for now, we just have to get the steering shaft apart so that we can get this old manifold out of there and get everything cleaned out like we did on the other side, and then see if we can get our snap bolts out. So I was able to get the front out in this side. It was a huge pain, guys. It took me I don't know, a good couple hours yesterday, and I did definitely spend another hour on it today, just because I preferred not to drill it out and time cert it. Hopefully you can see up in there that first one. I did beat it up a little bit, but it's not a big deal because the head doesn't actually seal there. I'm talking about right there. But now I have to do the back one. So you know, that's that. I'm gonna have to hopefully weld a nut on there, or just weld something onto it, try to get that one out, just like I did with the front one. Yeah, but definitely gave me a tough time on the front one. I just ended up welding multiple nuts on it, and I couldn't really get a good weld on it, and just working it back and forth. I ended up spraying some WD-40 and just, you know, working it to the right and to the left, to the right, to the left, and just eventually it wiggled free, and I was able to back it out with the vice grips. And that's how I've been able to do most of these. The nuts keep snapping off, but the vice grips are what always bail me out. So I'm gonna go ahead and try this rear one. Hopefully I can get something out of it. So I got the last one, guys. Thankfully, this guy right here was the last one, and I did get it out, even though it took a bit of a beating in the process. Chewed up the head a little bit. It's not the worst, but yeah, it definitely was a huge pain. Along with this front one here. This side was just so much harder. I'm not sure if it's because more difficult access, that rear one being super difficult on this side because I felt like it was tough to get to around the corner. Also the eye shaft and all this wiring on this side, as the other side was much cleaner. And then also the other thing is, on this side, the cylinder head wasn't warm from having just run the vehicle, so I don't know if that played a role as well. But this side just sucked. This side was awful. Don't expect this to be an easy job if you're looking to tackle something like this yourself. It's not fun. Alright guys, so we are back on the ground on this side. Hopefully the fan's not too loud, but it is like 90 degrees out here. It's pretty warm today. But yeah, we're back on the ground on the passenger side. Everything's nice and tight. Dipstick is back in. Yeah, everything's on. Everything's torqued down. Did about 18 foot-pounds because my torque wrench doesn't go to 15, but 15 foot-pounds is the recommended torque spec. I'm hoping we don't melt that number one plug wire on this side, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Yeah, over here we're looking good too. This thing is super close to the steering column, to the eye shaft and everything. It didn't end up hitting it, thankfully. I did have to take the eye shaft out in order to get the old one out and the new one in, which you just vice grip the top section and then bang on the vice grips after you take out the 15, which not too big of a deal. Just don't spin your steering wheel and have it go off. But anyway, I got everything all put back together and torqued down. I was going to retorque after a little heat cycle, but it doesn't look like anything really lost torque, so I should be good to go. I did break the tab on the engine coolant temperature sensor by that first plug right there. So I think I'm going to put a little bit of GMS on it just to make sure that it doesn't pop out. But other than that, I think we should be good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and put the wheel liner in. I did a little bit of clearancing, so I will no longer hit my tires on my fenders because of the wheel spacers. So hopefully that helps out too. But otherwise, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and put this thing back together, guys. I think we're going to be good to go. So I realized that I never really filmed much of an outro for this video, and the video files have just been sitting around, so I decided that I would film an outro and get one last exhaust clip for you guys. Maybe in the future, if you guys really like, I'll do some, you know, drive-bys and some more stuff like that, or some really good cold starts in the morning. Right now, it's not a super cold start. The truck has been driven today, so it's not that cold, but I will start it up for you guys. I wanted to show you all of the remaining pieces that I had from the job. So you can see these are all of the broken off bolts that I extracted with a welder, and most of them I ended up just using vice grips after I got a nice thing tacked on there. The nuts for the most part would fall off in my case, unfortunately. Maybe it's because I wasn't welding them good enough, or whatever the case is, but I did get them all out and I got it in. So we did have a little bit of fitment issues just with the steering shaft. So you really need to kind of dent these headers to make them fit, at least on the Avalanche, or on my particular Avalanche. I think some might be okay. It just barely rubs, enough for me to feel it in the steering wheel around corners when the engine's actually under load. So it's not the worst, but I do need to do something about it. It kind of bugs me a little bit. But anyway, I'll go ahead and cold start this thing, or as cold as it is right now. It's not that cold, but hopefully you guys can see all right. You really just need to hear though. Alright, so yeah, it does sound pretty good. It's not super loud, which, I expected it to be louder, honestly. But these headers are a really good purchase. I definitely recommend them with the correct gaskets and the new hardware. They really woke this truck up as far as, I don't know, just changing the sound. It didn't really make a ton of power, and I don't have a tune for it or anything like that. I probably could pick up from tuning it, but, as far as short tube headers go, there's not really a lot of gains to be made. It's more just for the sound and knowing that I don't have these snapped off manifold bolts. And there's no sense, if you're going to be taking out all these bolts, why not put headers on? Because it's kind of the whole difficult part of the job is taking those out. So you might as well put some headers on it in the process, especially if they bolt right up like this did. I really haven't had any issues, no leaks or anything. Yeah, the truck's been running really good and it sounds really good, and I'm happy. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider subscribing. And I don't post many videos of this truck, but if I get some people that are following for the truck, then I definitely will. But yeah, I got some plans for this thing. I like to mod my dailies, unfortunately, but I enjoy it. Anyway, peace out, guys, and have a good one. Consider subscribing, please.